Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self-confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self-doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self-worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. There is something truly empowering about sharing your suffering and having even just one other soul validate your moment of suffering. When this happens, it's truly a lifeline in our healing journey. Yet sometimes that just doesn't happen for us with the people involved who have hurt or offended us. So, how do we get past those barriers that surround our negative emotions to forgive, heal, and thrive again? This episode focuses on moving beyond our internal barriers and negative emotional reactions to rebuild our forgiveness mindset. As I mentioned in previous episodes, forgiveness is a complex concept and something many of us struggle with. This is why I split this forgiveness series into 5 parts to give each defining element its own space. In this 5th episode, you'll get a refresher on how forgiveness is more for us than those who hurt or offend us. You'll see behind the scenes of how I've learned to walk in forgiveness despite external things outside my control, and learn how to heal and thrive as we break through those inner barriers and overcome the negative emotions that result from offense and hurt. Like I explained in the previous episode, not everyone who offends us will receive what we have to say about our feelings, and some people will not empathize with us when it requires them to see another person in a negative light. Okay, so before I go into this episode any deeper, I just want to encourage you, if you haven't already joined my free Facebook community, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood, I encourage you to do so. Here's a safe space to find support, share stories, and gain community connection. So I want to talk to you about a forgiveness mindset that is rooted in understanding some of the motives and limitations that other individuals have. It's really helpful, I think, in my experience, when you have a larger perspective on what goes into people's motives and informs their behaviors. So I find that to be very helpful when I'm able to have a better perspective on human interactions and how to adjust some of my expectations in these interactions, then that forgiveness mindset goes into play. And then it allows me a very quick release to then get into the actual troubleshooting of dealing with the negative emotions, dealing with the other individual in whatever capacity I decide to deal with or whatever capacity I'm able to deal with them. So it's kind of like it frees you to then get down to the hard work. Sometimes people's limitations keep them from showing up for us in ways that we crave and deserve to experience in relationships. So you're going to find that when people offend you or hurt your feelings, that you may be left with someone on the receiving end now who just doesn't have the capacity or desire to show up for you in the ways that you deserve, in the ways that you crave. Their inability or refusal to show up has no merit on our worthiness. Of course, we're worthy to have fulfillment in our relationships and to have people be there for us. You know, if we're always going to be on the receiving end of hurt and offense and no possible way to resolve these things, or, you know, to be validated by the individual or other individuals in a circle of support, like, what's the point of getting out of bed every day? What would be the point of getting out of bed every day? Like, you know, there has to be something better out there. So I don't want you to think like what I'm trying to say to you is it's all bad. You're not going to exist with people who see your worth and want to build valuable relationships and want to work through things. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But because there's such a struggle with so many people on the side of being offended and on the side of being the offender, that it justifies coming up with series like this with all of these different outlets that people have to seek to work through the offense and the trauma associated with the negative feelings. So, you've got to tell yourself that when you find yourself in this situation where people are not able to show up for you, or you're just offended and you're working through it, that this doesn't mean that you failed on some level. Okay, no amount of trying harder or doing or giving more is going to change these circumstances when someone's just not willing to meet you in the middle there, when they're not willing to show up to the conversation table and then say, okay, what do we got in front of us? It's a futile cycle for us to try and fail to connect with someone who just doesn't have the capacity to show up the way that we need them to. So you'll just find yourself trapped chasing your own tail and getting frustrated the whole time that you're doing it. And you're not just getting frustrated with yourself in the situation, you're getting more and more frustrated with the other person. There will be those blessed times when we are able to talk through and mend broken trust, respect, and the faith in our relationships. So really don't lose hope. There will be plenty of times like that. We're just here today talking about the instances that trip us up and to try to walk away with some tools and strategies for how to navigate those times. Okay. And this is not to say that even in those more difficult situations that we are supposed to stop trying to open up lines of communication and to cultivate those meaningful interactions with those who have hurt or offended us. We should always do our part to cultivate this type of healthy relationship and the boundaries that we desire with people. Just know that we cannot control how another person does or does not respond to our attempts. And we cannot allow our healing to hinge on their negative reactions, their rejections, or their insensitivity to our real or perceived suffering. Again, coming back to something that I talked about in one of the earlier episodes in this series, it doesn't matter how valid they think your hurt is. That's not the deciding factor here. How many times have you found yourself in a situation where you do not even believe you hurt somebody, but you're like, my God, you see them suffering and you say, I am so sorry that this has impacted you this way, that my actions or my words impacted you this way. Like, I would never try to hurt you. I would never intend to do that. And you don't want to get yourself into defense, but where we find ourselves having to be like, wow, I didn't even realize that I was going to hurt you or offend you when I did or said that. So it's a valid interaction, where it could be those instances where it wasn't an intentional offense, or we didn't even realize that it would come across in an offending way. And that does not matter. That doesn't validate the instance. Now, of course, you're going to have people in your life or that cross paths with you in life who are chronically offended by every single thing. And you can find yourself constantly apologizing for things, even trying to frame that in a particular way where you're trying to model, good forgiveness mindset and the qualities of cultivating meaningful interactions and relationships. And some of those people they don't have the capacity to reciprocate it. Maybe they have some type of, mental hang up or an illness or some type of a trauma or something that they have to work through. And you can't work through that for them, but you also can't keep getting yourself trapped in the, oh my God, what have I done to you situation? Or you'll get really tired of being trapped into that or being wrangled into that over and over. That's not really the person that I'm talking about here right now. I'm talking about the instances where, it doesn't happen all the time, where it's just like it catches you off guard because you couldn't even imagine that that would hurt or offend somebody. And then there it is. It's right there, right? It happened. And now you're left with, what do I do with that as the person who is seen as the one who created the negative emotions? Of course, in a perfect world, emotionally healthy people would just coexist and work all these things out, like the textbook example. But if you live in the same imperfect world as I do, stay with me as I dig below the surface of forgiving and healing our emotions, regardless of the other person's cooperation. I use that word cooperation because there's no better word. So when we have a forgiveness mindset, it simply means we consciously choose to let go of the negative emotions that we have for people who have hurt or offended us. It allows us to live in this freedom as we cut ourselves free from the dead, toxic weight that unforgiveness is. Remember, unforgiveness does not let the other person off the hook without consequences, and it doesn't mean we forget or ignore these. Again, consequences always catch up with another person. We really do reap what we sow. So whether we get to see that justice or see that those consequences catch up with the person and smack them upside the head, it's going to happen. So you can't even protect people from reaping what they sow. So even you forgiving, working through it, letting them off the hook, that gets set into motion the moment they do the act. And there's nothing that you can do to control that as well. This last focus point on adopting a forgiveness mindset is one close to my heart. Not only have I struggled with unforgiveness in the past, I've also seen far too many loved ones become a horrible version of themselves when they refuse to forgive. I know you know who I'm talking about. Those types of people exist in every one of our lives. And a couple of these people in my life have been trapped so long in this version of themselves, they're intolerable to be around. And, you go it's like a trajectory. You go from like your heart breaking for the fact that they're trapped in these vicious cycles of unforgiveness that are bitter and resentful to this, I can't be around them. Oh my gosh, I just can't. I do not have the capacity. I found myself saying this to one of my loved ones recently. I said, I do not have the emotional capacity to be around this right now. And it was so freeing to even just admit that. And one of the unsettling things about unforgiveness is that it really quickly turns to resentment. And this is that toxic potion that we drink, expecting to make the other person sick. I know I've mentioned this in the other episode, so I'm going to give you a different spin on it. We wouldn't drink toxic water if we were dying of thirst. So, why do we drink resentment and bitterness when what we're really thirsty for is a healthy existence and meaningful relationships? Maybe we don't even know what we're thirsty for. And I'm the first person to ask you, what is it that you want? So we need to know what we want. We need to have goals and we need to have an end game in mind. I have talked about this almost in every single episode because until we figure out what it is we want and we set those clear goals and we set our clear boundaries and then we work toward that goal and then we adjust when life changes or we change or environments change and we say, we can't do it that way anymore, or I'm not interested in doing it that way anymore. And we adjust our course. We maybe even adjust the goals, but we have to have those things in mind and we have to have them adjusted and have them in mind as we're moving along the way. We can't navigate life with any clear sense of direction and purpose if we don't have that. Here's a dirty truth about negative emotions. They're usually attached to other deeply rooted negative emotions we're already carrying within. So when these are triggered, it brings those other instances to mind. If these are unresolved negative emotions, it's not hard to imagine how this will aggravate the new raw emotions. And if we've put the work in to resolve these past hurts, this trigger will still be a soft spot for us. It's like scar tissue. It will always be a little tender where it takes another blow. It's no other better way to say it. So we have to have the grace and mercy for ourselves when we feel a new offense and hurt hit the old spot the wrong way. So not only do we have to have a forgiveness mindset for the negative emotions toward others, we have to have it for ourselves as well. We have to be forgiving of ourselves and not be hard on ourselves when we feel like, oh, that got hit. I did the work. Why am I reacting this way? Well, because maybe it hit your soft spot. And anybody who has a deep physical wound knows that when you hit that hard against something, it's always a tender thing. It's like, oof, like, oh, that really hurt. My skin is not thick enough there. That really, really hurt. So we have to have that grace for ourselves as well. This brings me to the $1,000,000 question. How do we release and forgive those who have hurt or offended us? And how do we deal with all the negative emotions that arise? Let's qualify something important here. This is much larger than simply dealing with our hurt and feelings from suffering and injustice. Some of our negative emotions will be directed toward the person who hurt or offended us. That's right. Not all of your negative emotions will be toward what you feel as the offense. It will also be toward the offender. It's important to deal with both of these sets of emotions. These emotions that scream, I can't believe this happened to me, and it's left me feeling this awful. And I don't see this person the same as a result of this awful experience. And what am I supposed to do with these negative feelings about them? So I talked about my bat encounter in the last episode, so I'm not going to rehash all of that. You can go back and listen to that episode if you want to hear about me getting trapped in a cabin with two bats and just having a nightmare of a night. But I want to recap a couple of things from that experience. I want to just talk about in the raw of it how being left there to deal with the bats by myself and not getting the help that I asked for really made me feel so many negative emotions that were compacted. And then they just continued to compact over the week while I was trying to work through the negative emotions from the experience and then the negative emotions that compounded my suffering when everybody went silent ever since I mentioned the incident. That compacted over the week as I wrestled with the trauma and my emotions. So I make it through this living nightmare that left me with restless sleep and night terrors. It's again left me flinching from every shadow when I walk through my house at night. And it has filled me with a hopelessness and a sense of invisibility during a time where I'm already struggling with feeling invisible in other circles and other situations that I'm trying to work through. And isn't it always that way when we're already feeling down about something and really not quite wrestled through it, that life throws us something else that now we're drowning in the middle of two different experiences. And it really challenges us to step up our game. But something that this experience did is it showed me who does have a capacity to show up for me, like my daughters. Okay, so the one daughter races to see me and help me, and she shared that trauma. And when she got there, she was actually excited that I needed her help because she's always the one asking me for help. And so she had this instance where she was like, I'm just glad that you needed my help. And that enthusiasm is what brought her into the house. And it gave her courage. And after we talked about these things, and she was like, yeah, I don't know where all that courage was coming from. But she also works in the medical industry. So she kind of went into action and used skills that she uses in her everyday life and that she's used in past jobs to navigate this crisis. And it was really valuable to have her there, not just for her support, but also when we put our heads together, we were coming up with a lot of good things. But the thing I want to share with you is that she had the capacity to show up physically and emotionally for me. And, you know, it just reminded me when I reflected back on the experience, and I was just like, thank God I wasn't there alone the whole time. Those 2.5 hours or 2 hours that I was there by myself felt like forever. And it felt like it would never end. You know how that is when you're alone in a crisis. It feels like it's forever. And then when she got there, it was a totally different situation. I felt my confidence improve just by having another person there with me. And then when I started sharing some of my negative emotions, and she was both validating and also helping me put some of those emotions into a better perspective. You know, That's another thing. Like a lot of times when we're in the raw of our negative emotions, we can't see the larger picture clearly. We can't think about the other individuals involved with a more open mindset. And, that's not to say that we're dismissing the fact that I wasn't able to get the help that I asked to get. That could have been there in minutes when I reached out, but I had to wait and I had to go through this process. It made me realize the benefit and the beauty of me cultivating friendships and a sisterhood with my daughters that has moved into their adult life. And I can remember when my daughters were younger and I was building those relationships with them, which looked a little different. So many people were giving me a lot of negative advice like, you're not, parents aren't meant to be friends with their kids, and kids are meant to be seen, not heard, and all these other things. And I thought, that seems really counterintuitive because here is my chance to be their first example of friendship. In every other area of their life, they will have opportunities to develop friendships with people in authority over them. They're going to have bosses, teachers, mentors, other people in their life who have some type of authority over them in their communities and in their everyday lives. So, why, when they're younger, would I not want to start building the foundation of what relationships can look like and what they can continue to grow into as they are changing? They're becoming a different version of themselves, and we are becoming a different version of ourselves. The saying that's going around right now that, siblings that were raised by the same parents really were not raised by the same parents because even the parents change from kid to kid. We as adults change. So we're not going to be the same 3 years later when we're going through the same or similar situations with a child that we're raising, with our second child that we're raising, or our third child that we're raising. And so we're putting in this work, this foundational work that eventually, when our kids kind of age out, where they're not, our responsibility to manage and keep safe, we're still going to want to help them. We're still going to want to guide them. We're still going to want to mentor them. We're still going to care about their well being. We just have a different relationship with them now. So now I have these incredible three young adults who have my back in a way I never even imagined. Talk about a bonus. I just was hoping that we would have good relationships because they're my people. They get me. So they know my language. They know my love languages. They know I love to have fun. They know when I like to be serious. They know that I'm creative and like to share that with them. They know all of these things about me and they share a lot of different things and they're all different. So I have different interactions with each one of them. And the dynamics are even different when all four of us get together. But I get that. I get to have three friends that I helped raise. So as I live in a world where one of the things that I'm really struggling with is developing more of these adult, meaningful relationships and really trying to revisit some of my older ones to reestablish them, at least I have my daughters. And they're in this incredible sisterhood with me. And so, if you're a mama of littles right now, maybe you need to hear this. What a beautiful chance we have to foster friendship with our kids that prepares them for healthy relationships later in life. And that sets us up to evolve into healthy adult relationships that we already started on a solid foundation of trust and respect. Think about how hard it is to develop new relationships built on trust and respect, and who people who know your boundaries, who understand how you navigate and adjust those boundaries, who know about your nuances and your ticks and who accept you anyway. I mean, just think about how incredible that is. I can't imagine if I had taken people's advice, and trust me, I was getting it from all over the place. And I just thought, you know what? No, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to I'm going to follow my heart and my mind. I've talked about this before in another episode, how we really got to keep that mind, heart, and spirit connection. It's like a trifold cord, and it's super strong when all three of these things come together. And so I'm like, I am going to rely on these three things together. And I'm going to trust my intuition on this, my mama intuition, and know that it's going to produce amazing fruit when the time comes. And I am reaping the benefits of that now. And so we might fight like sisters, but we make up like sisters. And I cannot imagine not having these three dynamic young women have my back and have the opportunity to return that favor. So another thing that I was thinking about when I had time to defragment and really meditate on this throughout the week is that after an offense, we really are challenged to separate the person from their actions. And I remember I learned this in a Bible study years ago, and I thought, wow, that's an incredible way to navigate life, is that we have to be able to separate people from their actions. Otherwise, we'll only see them and judge them by isolated actions. We won't see their larger character. Again, that doesn't dismiss negative things that happen, doesn't dismiss the offensive things that people do. It doesn't dismiss the fact that they may not hold themselves accountable for those things. It just means that we need to be able to separate these things so that we can see the whole person and we don't allow that person's total humanity to be stripped away from them with one act, because we see that happening right now in our culture. That is what cancel culture breeds on. Nobody in the mob mentality and social media knows the totality of an individual before they all join the march to cancel them, or an organization. We'll pull a couple of things in maybe, and then that's enough. Canceled. And it's really frightening. And so every time I see this cancel culture get ignited, I'm like, oh my God, we need to first separate the instance from the person, assess it. I'm not saying like, oh, everybody's complicated, let them get away with murder. What I'm saying is we need to put the footwork in to be able to go through this in our interactions, and also in the interactions like these instances that I reference, the cancel culture stuff that we get sucked into. We have to still make the informed decisions, and that has some steps to it. That has some work that we have to put in. We also have to resist the temptation to act in a fit of rage. I know it's so easy to do, to just right in the moment, just get right in there. But this is usually a surefire way to be dismissed. It's right up there with ranting, because what happens when we're in a fit of rage is we just come across like we're ranting. So I was recently just talking about this with my communication students, and I said, what do you think people's reaction will be when we come off like we're simply angrily ranting? And they were getting it. They were like, well, they're going to be like, la 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 la, I don't hear you, or I'm not listening, or I'm going to turn the volume down on you, or I'm going to mute you altogether. So I might be looking at you going, okay, shaking my head, but I'm not letting any of it in because you just need to get it out and you're not making any sense. So that's what people treat us like when they perceive us as ranting. Doesn't have to be real or valid. I'm just telling you, if you want to improve your interactions, just know that that's the typical response you're going to get when you act just in a fit of rage. So sometimes you can't control yourself. I get it. The temptation is overwhelming and you succumb to it. But in those instances, we're almost always going to be perceived as just angry rant, and how much validity can I give that? So, how do we take that breath, calm it down, and just speak our truth, but do it with conviction? There are so many different ways. You have to use your own dialogue. You have to rehearse your own stuff, but it can be as simple as, this is how I was impacted by this. This is why I was hindered or hurt. This is, just explaining with truth. And, if you resist, I heard another good speaker recently say, avoid doing these things in the heat of an exchange. And I thought, really interesting, especially when we're talking about telling our truth and holding people accountable, is don't blatantly point the finger at them. And I thought, there's a challenge. So we have to now, while we're also dealing with our raw emotions and working through the negative of it, and we get those opportunities to talk to people, we now have to be prepared. We have to have a plan for how we will say things. And that is a skill that we do have to practice. You might have to write it down, say it in front of a mirror, but to master this approach, we got to come up with a way that we would say things to speak that truth, to speak it with conviction. So we're not removing all the agency here, but we're not saying you. Okay. So there's just a little bit of a shift in how we frame those things. And this is also something that I was talking about with these students, because that's what we're talking about, communications and the rhetorical situation. One of the things that we have to do is recognize the damage done in the relationship. So, has the trust been broken? How can this be repaired? Have we lost respect or faith in this person? How can this be repaired? Can it be repaired? What are our expectations in resolving our hurt, our offense? Have we communicated these to the others involved? Have we spoken to someone else about it? In both instances, if we're left with negative emotions, communication really is a good first line of defense. I hate to even use the word defense here in this context, yet it can sometimes feel as if we're on the defense with expressing our emotions to someone who has hurt or offended us. As I just mentioned, always speak your piece when you are in a position to do so. So don't like run for the hills. I know I hate confrontation, and I've really had to work at not looking at it like confrontation in the negative sense and just look at it as here's my opportunity to get some things out there that are really important. It's our opportunity to help somebody see the situation from our eyes and from our heart. Okay, so don't neglect to take that opportunity. But again, maybe practice how you might want to present it. That's a really important thing. That's part of that character building and that restoring that inner warrior. It isn't just always, the battle tools that we use with our hands. It's often the battle tools that we use to combat the inner battles and then the battles that we are working through in our relationships with other people. One of the things I keep bringing up over and over and over again is journaling. I mean, writing stuff down is super powerful. If you haven't tried it yet, I highly recommend that you do it. It's amazing how effective journaling is. It's such a simple thing, but it really is amazing to get stuff down when we're thinking about negative emotions. Sometimes seeing it outside of our head makes things clear. Sometimes it helps us identify one thing so that we can then progress in our thinking to another. And that might be that barrier that's keeping us from moving and progressing in our healing. It gives us a better clarity and helps us make those meaningful connections and reveals more specific things that we need to address. That's the simplest way I can put it. So much of our healing comes from a better understanding of the offense and the hurt and our reaction to it, all these things that inform those negative emotions. So, how can we possibly address and heal negative emotions if we don't even know what to call them? Or at the very least, how to identify them in a lineup? So this is just one of the ways that is really impactful in identifying those negative emotions and then getting a game plan together to try to deal with them. You can even keep writing over and over and over again, entering it again from a new place, entering it again from this point, from this negative emotion. Okay, now I want to talk about this now that it's out there. Okay, now how did that make me feel? It's limitless, the entrances into thinking and healing that exist when we just start writing things down and then looking at them, taking that kind of step back, looking at it from a new set of eyes. Another thing that we can do is talk to someone else about our negative emotions and the situation as a whole. A professional like a therapist, counselor, or mentor is a really good person to enlist in this role. A trusted friend or a loved one, as in my case recently, I had two daughters who were actually trauma bonded with me in two different situations that had to do with bats. And I also have all three of my daughters who have been an invaluable, trusted person that I could share some of my struggles with and who have given me really sound encouragement and advice and even validation for some of the things that I've been struggling through. So, don't underestimate the power of just sharing something with someone who isn't necessarily a professional at it, but someone who knows you and can speak into your life in ways that maybe a therapist or a mentor or a counselor might take a lot longer to get to know you that way, to be able to speak with such wisdom into your life. If you're a spiritual person like I am, you can talk to God and spend time in nature. These are both really powerful ways to talk through your negative emotions and to get that clarity to guide your next steps. Never underestimate the power in sharing with someone who will listen and seek to understand, and then speak into your suffering with words of wisdom, validation, encouragement. So all of these different methods are really available to you. Seriously, resist the temptation to totally isolate yourself and get trapped into that really dark, hopeless space. God, do I know how easy it is to slip into that dark pit of despair? And this is that space where depression and a whole other slew of grief-related emotions bury us alive, especially when we get trapped there long term. There's a time to work through these emotions, which I talk about in Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free. If you need more on that, there's a link below for you to find my self-help book. If connecting with professional help seems daunting or out of reach, consider reaching out to a crisis outline, like the crisis text line is a really easy one to use. Just text HOME, HOME, to 741741 to be connected with a trained crisis counselor. And I'll drop this down in the show notes below. I have an extensive list of resources on my A Rift Warrior Project website, as well as in the Warrior Sister book. I'll drop a link below for that page as well. Another step that we can take is to set, reset, and communicate our boundaries. This also requires us to assess these relationships to see which ones are safe to restore and worth rebuilding, and which ones may need to be severed. I know I've talked about this in a couple of the other episodes, and it's a thing. Sometimes you get to that point where you have to decide, is this relationship going to move forward? Do I have to create distance with this person? There might be those other instances where you can't sever ties altogether, but you're clearly going to set some space in between you so that your interactions are lessened and you don't have to interact with the individual as regularly as you were. Do something nice for yourself. This is something that I talk about in my book and I do all the time. So go do something that you enjoy by yourself or with others. Simple acts of love like this have potent healing benefits. First of all, they open us up to experience positive emotions, even if all our negative ones aren't resolved. That's the beautiful part. You don't have to have everything all resolved in order to start enjoying life again. Just one little step at a time. Remember, we don't exist in a vacuum where we can isolate each emotion and only experience one of them at a time. Life is full of emotions coming at us in all different ways and all different times, crossing over multiple at once, and we can't even control any of that. So think about how these acts of self-love, where you're just going out and trying to do something that you enjoy, will bolster your self-worth and confidence in yourself and in your future. And the reason why they do this is because they show us that we have value beyond our hurt and offense. They also help us restore our faith in a healthy and fulfilling future. Oftentimes, that starts to get killed and buried when we're trapped under negative emotions that we don't deal with, and then they'll start to compound, and we do start to lose our faith in ever being able to live in a healthy and fulfilling way. These self-love acts also get us out there again in the wonderful world outside of our inner turmoil. They help us get those good feeling endorphins that our bodies and brains need to function in a more positive and peaceful state. One day, I'm going to have a retreat space for us in this shared sisterhood to meet up and heal and enjoy quality time together. I promise I'm actually working on this right now. And until then, may you be inspired by these new insights and strategies, and may you be encouraged to know you are not alone in this struggle to maintain a forgiveness mindset as you wrestle with negative emotions. Remember, girlfriend, you really do hold the power to restore that inner warrior and live with fierce confidence. Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Friday. Ciao.